There are mornings that look like every other morning until they do not. The tea service at Pembroke House had been laid the same way for 7 years. The silver pot, the 2 cups, the small dish of sugar Helena never touched. And on this particular morning in late February, with the east windows letting in a thin winter sun that fell across the carpet in pale strips, Lady Helena Fairborn sat in her usual chair and waited for her husband with the stillness of a woman who has made a decision she cannot unmake. Lord William Fairborn, Marquis of Pembroke, came through the door expecting nothing. He had come through that door expecting nothing for 7 years. He saw his wife in her chair, the pot steaming, the room arranged as it had always been arranged, and he moved toward the table with the ease of a man who has never once had reason to break his stride in this room. Helena lifted the pot. She poured. Her hand did not tremble. The tea filled his cup to exactly the place she had always filled it, not a drop more, not a drop less, and she set the pot down with a small, precise click against the tray. And she said, without looking at him, "I know about her." The cup was full. Her voice had not changed. William's hand, reaching for the saucer, stopped in the air, and it was shaking. She looked at him then. Not with the expression he might have feared. Not fury, not tears, not the theatrical collapse of a woman wronged. She looked at him the way one looks at a fact that has finally been said aloud, with recognition and with something close to relief, and with the particular weariness of a person who has been carrying a weight alone for a very long time. "I have known," Helena said, "for nearly 5 years. I found the bank drafts in the 2nd year of our marriage. I made inquiries. I understood what the arrangement was." She picked up her own cup and held it, but did not drink. "I have known, and I have known alone, and I will not do that any longer." William lowered his hand. He did not pick up the cup. He sat down in the chair across from her, slowly, as a man sits when the floor has proven less solid than he believed. "Helena," he began, "I am not asking you to explain it this morning," she said. "I am telling you that I know. That is all I am doing." She drank her tea. He did not drink his. The winter sun moved a fraction across the carpet. Outside, somewhere in the house, a door closed. The ordinary sounds of Pembroke House continued without them, indifferent and steady, as though nothing at all had happened in the morning room. That afternoon, with the same practiced calm she brought to every task she undertook in this house, Helena sent for her maid and began to discuss the arrangements for Marlowe House in Hertfordshire. 3 days passed. They were not 3 days of scenes or raised voices. They were 3 days of the particular silence that falls between two people who have said one true thing and have not yet said the rest. William spent much of it in his study, the door locked, which was unusual enough that the housekeeper mentioned it to no one and hoped it would resolve itself. Helena continued to manage the house. She answered correspondence. She ate her meals. She did not go to the morning room. On the 3rd morning, she came to the study to collect her grandmother's writing desk, which she intended to take with her to Hertfordshire. She knocked once. After a moment, the lock turned. William had been waiting. Helena could see it in the way he was standing, not at his desk, not by the window, but in the center of the room, as if he had placed himself there deliberately, having considered where to stand. "I will not keep you long," Helena said. "I have come for the desk." "I know." He did not move to ring for a footman. He looked at her directly. "Helena, will you give me 5 minutes before you take it?" She set down the small traveling case she was carrying and waited. "I am not going to speak about Caroline," William said. "Not yet?" Not because I am protecting anything. Because I think if I begin there, I will say it wrong. And what I need to say first is something I have only understood this week. He paused, and what Helena noticed was that he was not rehearsed. The words were coming out with the slight unevenness of a man finding them as he spoke. I have been managing this marriage. I do not mean I have been unkind. I mean I have been arranging it. Deciding what you needed to know and what you did not. Deciding what was mine to carry and what was yours. And I told myself that was consideration. He stopped. It was not consideration. It was a man who arrived here 7 years ago with a closed compartment in his life, and never once asked himself why he was keeping it closed, not for your sake, because he had never formed the habit of asking. Helena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You are not wrong. I know. That is not absolution, William. I am not asking for absolution." He said it plainly, without bitterness. I am asking you to know that I see it. That is all I can offer you this morning. Helena crossed to the writing desk, which stood beside the bookcase where it had always stood. Her grandmother's desk, small and worn, brought here when she married and placed in a room that had never quite felt like hers. She ran one hand across the top of it. "I am going to Marlowe House," she said. "I do not know for how long. When I'm ready to write, I will write." She looked at him. The silence had become heavier than the truth would have been. That is what I want you to understand. Not that you hurt me, though you did, but that the weight of knowing alone for 5 years was heavier than anything you were protecting me from. William said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. And he was, for the first time in their marriage, wise enough to know it. Helena left the following morning with her maid, 2 trunks, and her grandmother's writing desk. Marlowe House in early March was cold and quiet, and Helena discovered within the first 48 hours, entirely her own. There was no household to manage beyond what she chose to manage. There were no callers who required anything of her. There were no careful arrangements to maintain, no second truth to carry alongside the first. She woke in the mornings, and the day was simply what it was. She wrote letters she'd been postponing for months. She called on the vicar's wife and offered to assist with reading lessons at the village school. An offer that was accepted with such genuine gratitude that Helena sat in her carriage on the way home and felt, for the first time and she could not remember how long, that she had done something entirely uncomplicated. William's first letter arrived on the 4th day. She recognized his hand on the envelope and set it on the mantel without opening it. It sat there for 2 days, neither threatening nor comforting, simply present. On the 3rd evening, the temperature had dropped sharply, and the fire in her sitting room had been built up twice already. Helena came in from a walk to find her maid Graves arranging something over the back of her usual chair. It was a shawl. Heavy, dark wool, slightly worn at one edge. William's old traveling shawl, which had lived on the hook beside his dressing room door for as long as Helena could remember. He had sent it with the letter. Helena stood in the doorway for a moment. Graves withdrew without being asked. Helena sat in the chair. She did not put the shawl on. She did not move it. It rested against her shoulders, its weight present at her back. And she sat that way through the rest of the evening, reading, then setting the book down, then simply watching the fire. With the shawl behind her and the unopened letter on the mantel, until the fire burned low and she finally went to bed. She opened the letter the following morning and read it twice. It contained no plea and no argument. It described the house, the east windows, the morning room, which he had not entered since she left. He asked, at the end, whether she was warm enough, and whether Graves had remembered to bring the extra blankets from the linen press. She answered the third letter briefly. Yes, I am warm enough. Come if you need to. But write first. He did not write first. He arrived unannounced on a Tuesday, his horse visible from the upstairs window, and Helena looked at him from behind the curtain for a moment before she went downstairs and told Graves to inform Lord Pembroke that she was not receiving visitors. She heard, through the closed front door, the sound of William's voice thanking the footman. She heard nothing else. 2 hours later, when she looked out again, his horse was gone. He returned a week later, and this time he had written. He came with a letter, not his own, but one addressed to Helena in an unfamiliar hand, which he had been asked to carry. She received him in the entrance hall. He did not attempt to come further than that. "This is from Caroline Wexley," he said, holding out the envelope. "She asked me to deliver it. She would like to meet you, openly." He paused. "The decision is entirely yours." Helena took the envelope. "You may wait in the garden," she said, "if you would like to walk." He would like to walk. They went out through the side door into the walled garden, where the frost still rimmed the old stone, and the moss between the paving stones had gone dark with cold. They walked the perimeter without speaking at first, which was not uncomfortable. It was simply the quiet of two people who had more to say than either of them knew how to begin. Near the far wall, where the path turned and the moss was thickest, Helena's foot went out from under her. It happened quickly, a slip, a sharp lurch, and William's hand shot out and caught her wrist before she had fully registered losing her balance. He pulled her steady. It was done in a second, without thought, without ceremony. She did not pull away. He did not release her wrist immediately. He held it for a beat longer than the steadying required, and she was aware of his grip and of his stillness, and neither of them said anything about it. He let go. They continued walking. That evening, alone in her sitting room, Helena read Caroline's letter. It was not what she had expected, though she could not have said precisely what she had expected. The letter was clear and direct, and written by someone who had clearly composed it carefully, setting down each sentence with the awareness that it would be read by a woman who had every reason to resent the writer's existence. Caroline asked for a meeting, not to explain or to justify, but because, she wrote, she had spent 5 years knowing of Lady Pembroke's existence and being grateful for a grace she had never had the chance to acknowledge in person. She did not ask for forgiveness. She asked only for the opportunity to speak plainly, face to face, to a woman she had thought about more than Helena could know. Helena set the letter on her desk. She sat for a moment, looking at the cold garden through the window. Then she took out a sheet of paper and wrote back, inviting Caroline Wexley to Marlowe House. In the same week that Caroline's letter arrived, Helena found the passage in her grandmother's correspondence. She had been sorting through the old box of papers, something she had been meaning to do for years, which had traveled with the writing desk and now sat beside it. And the letter was from a cousin, written to Helena's grandmother in the final months of her widowhood. Helena read it once quickly, and then went back to the beginning and read it again. The cousin wrote of Helena's grandmother, "She has not recovered from learning of it, I think, not because the arrangement itself was dishonorable, it was not, but because she learned of it at his deathbed. 30 years of marriage, and the thing was told to her only because there was no longer any reason to withhold it. She says she does not know whether to grieve him or to be furious with him, and I am afraid she will spend the rest of her life unable to do either." Helena set the letter down. She sat without moving for some time. Then she opened the small locked drawer in the writing desk, the one she had carried with her from Pembroke, the one she had told no one about. And she took out what was inside. The bank drafts she had found in year 2, folded small. A note she had written to herself in Bath, under a false name, the afternoon she had met Caroline at a lending library, and understood, watching her, that the arrangement was exactly what it appeared to be. A list of dates. Visits William had made to Bath, cross-referenced against dates in his diary, which she had checked quietly, methodically, over the course of a single winter. The record of 5 years of knowing alone. She placed her grandmother's cousin's letter beside the contents of the drawer, on the surface of the writing desk, and looked at them together. Her grandmother had learned at a deathbed. Helena had learned in year 2 and had chosen silence. Had chosen it deliberately. Had told herself it was wisdom. Had told herself that to speak would be to humiliate them both. She had been protecting his protection. And she had spent 5 years becoming, by degrees, a woman who managed the truth the way William managed the marriage. By deciding, alone, what the other person needed to know. She did not destroy either document. She put them both away. She wrote to Caroline, confirming the invitation. And for the first time in 5 years of thinking about Caroline Wexley, she signed the letter with her own name. Caroline arrived on a March afternoon when the light was thin and flat, and the last of the garden's frost had finally retreated from the stones. She was younger than Helena had imagined from the letter, 26 now, with a directness in her manner that Helena recognized immediately as the quality of someone who had learned, early, that composure was not the same as evasion. They sat in the front parlor. Tea was brought and largely ignored. "I want to tell you what William was to me," Caroline said, after the maid had withdrawn. "Not what he was not. I think you know that already. What he was." "Tell me," Helena said. "My father was his closest friend," Caroline said. "When my father died, I was 19. There was an uncle, my father's brother. He had managed to place himself in a position to control my inheritance, and his intention was to arrange a marriage that would allow him to access it permanently. The man he had in mind was not someone my father would have permitted near me." She said it simply, without dramatics. "William went to the solicitors. He established a legal guardianship that placed my affairs outside my uncle's reach. To have any force, it required absolute secrecy. Any public acknowledgement would have given my uncle grounds to challenge it." She paused. "I have lived quietly in Bath for 7 years. I have had a companion, a small income, and my own life. I am not a woman in a novel. I am simply a woman who was kept safe." Helena was quiet for a moment. "He never told me," she said. "No." Caroline looked at her directly. "He told me, when I asked, that you did not need to know because the arrangement predated your marriage and did not concern you." She paused. "I want you to know that I did not agree with him. I told him so twice." "What did he say?" "The first time, he said the legal risk was real, and that disclosure could unravel the guardianship before my uncle died. That was true. The second time, my uncle had been ill for 2 years. I told him the risk had passed and that he ought to speak to you. He said he would consider it." Caroline set down her cup. "He did not consider it. He simply did not." Helena absorbed this. "When did you write to me?" "The week after my uncle died, in February." Caroline's voice was steady. "I wrote to William first, to say the arrangement was no longer necessary. He did not answer for a week, so I wrote to you." The room was quiet. Outside, a cart passed on the lane, the sound of it rising and fading. "I want to ask you something," Helena said. She answered at once. Yes. Did you know that I knew? Caroline looked at her for a moment. I suspected it, she said. There was a woman at the lending library in Bath 3 years ago. She asked about a new novel I was carrying. We spoke for perhaps 10 minutes. She had your eyes. She paused. I thought about writing to you then. I thought about writing to you, Helena said. They sat with that for a moment. We were both very careful, Caroline said, and there was something in her voice, not quite dry, not quite sad, that made Helena, for the first time in a long while, want to smile. We were, Helena agreed. Lady Augusta Fairborn arrived the following week without announcement, which was, Helena reflected, entirely consistent with her character. She was William's elder sister by 8 years, a tall, composed woman who wore her opinions the way she wore her jewelry, prominently and without apology. She had taken the carriage from London, which meant she had decided to come before she had written, which meant she had not wanted to give Helena the opportunity to decline. Helena received her in the same front parlor, with tea ordered and the fire built up. And she waited. Augusta delivered her speech with the efficiency of a woman who had prepared it in the carriage and saw no reason to deviate from it. The family name, the necessity of Helena's return, the manner in which a long absence could be misread by the kind of people who had nothing better to do than misread things. The importance, and here Augusta's voice took on a note of particular significance, of not allowing a private difficulty to become a public matter. When she finished, Helena said, "How long have you known?" Augusta's composure did not crack. It adjusted the way ice adjusts when weight is placed on it, not breaking, but registering the pressure. Known about what? About Caroline Wexley, Helena said. About the arrangement, about the guardianship, the house in Bath, the annuity. How long have you known? A pause. Some years, Augusta said. How many years, Augusta? Another pause, briefer. Nearly 7. Nearly 7, Helena repeated. The full length of my marriage. The arrangement was not improper. I am aware of that, Helena said. I have met Caroline. I know exactly what the arrangement was. That is not what I am asking you. She kept her voice very quiet, which she had found, over the years, to be far more effective than raising it. I am asking why you knew, and why you did not tell me, and what you believed you were protecting. Augusta set down her cup, which she had been holding but not drinking from. William asked me not to speak of it. He said it was managed. He said it did not concern you. And you agreed with him. I thought it was the kindest course. For whom? Helena said. Augusta did not answer immediately. I want to be very clear with you, Helena said, because I think you came here believing I am in a position where I require your guidance, and I am not. I am in a position where I have chosen, for the first time in 5 years, not to carry a silence that did not protect me. That is all. I am not in distress. I am not in need of rescue. She stood, because Augusta was still seated, and Helena found she preferred to be standing. I am also no longer in the business of preserving arrangements that served everyone in this family except me. If you came here to ask me to return to Pembroke for the sake of appearances, then I am afraid you have had a long journey for nothing. You may take your tea with you if you like. I will have Graves wrap it. Augusta stood. She was, to her credit, not flustered. She was simply, for perhaps the first time in their acquaintance, without a prepared response. I will tell William, she said at the door, that you are well. Please do, Helena said. Tell him also that I am thinking. Augusta left without sitting back down. The letter from Bath came on a Thursday morning in late March. It was from Caroline's companion, Mrs. Holt, and it was brief. Caroline had developed a fever. It had worsened quickly. Mrs. Holt thought Lord Pembroke should be informed, and she had taken the liberty of writing to Lady Pembroke as well, because she did not know who else to write to. Helena read the letter at her writing desk, then set it down and sat for a moment with her hands flat on the surface of the desk. Then she rang for Graves and told her to begin packing. She sent a rider to Pembroke with a note for William that contained 4 words. "I am going to Bath. Come." He was waiting at the junction on the Bath road when her carriage reached it. He had ridden rather than waited for a carriage of his own, and he was travel-stained and cold and did not waste time on explanation. He dismounted, handed his horse to his groom, and got into her carriage. They traveled the rest of the way without speaking about anything except Caroline. How the fever had begun, what Mrs. Holt had written, whether the doctor in Bath was competent. Caroline was worse than the letter had suggested. She was conscious when they arrived, though barely, and she knew who they were, which Helena would later think of as a mercy. That she had known, in those hours, that both of them were there. They sat on either side of the small bed in the room that smelled of lavender and coal smoke, and they kept watch through the afternoon and into the evening, and through the long hours of the night. Near dawn, the quality of the room changed. Helena could not have said precisely how. The light had not shifted, the fire was still burning. But something in the stillness altered, and she looked across the bed at William, and she saw that he understood it too. His hand was resting on the coverlet, near Caroline's. Helena reached out and placed her hand over his. She did not look at him when she did it. She simply laid her hand over his where it rested, and she left it there. And they remained that way until Caroline was gone. The carriage home was quiet, in a different register entirely. Not the silence of 7 years, not the careful, managed hush of 2 people each carrying half a truth, but the stillness of 2 people who had just shared the same grief and did not need to name it to hold it together. They spoke eventually about Caroline herself, what she had been like, the things she had said over the years, a particular afternoon in Bath when she had apparently argued with her companion for an hour about the correct way to arrange a bookshelf. William told the story with a quiet affection that Helena had not heard in his voice before, and she listened. And when he finished, she told him about the woman at the lending library, and the novel, and the 10-minute conversation. William was quiet for a moment. "She suspected it was you," he said. "She told me." "I did not know that." "No," Helena said. "You did not know a great many things that were happening." He did not defend himself. The carriage moved through the dark, and eventually Helena closed her eyes, and she slept for a little while, with her head against the cold window glass. She returned to Marlow. He returned to Pembroke. Neither of them suggested otherwise. 10 days passed without a letter from either of them. This was the lowest point, not because anything happened, but because nothing did. And the absence of communication, after everything, felt like an answer of its own. Helena taught her reading lessons at the village school. She walked in the garden. She sat at her grandmother's desk in the evenings and did not write. She thought, for the first time with real seriousness, that the marriage might simply be over. Not ended in anger. She was not angry, exactly. Or she was. But the anger had become complicated by grief and by the recognition of her own share in the architecture of silence. But over in the way that some things end, quietly, by attrition, because the distance between 2 people has become the truth of their life rather than a temporary condition. She did not write to anyone about this. She sat with it in the evenings until the fire burned low. On the 11th day, a letter arrived. It was not an apology. Helena recognized this immediately, and it was the thing that made her read it all the way through, rather than setting it aside. William did not apologize. He described the morning room at Pembroke House. Her chair, empty. The tea service laid each morning by the housekeeper out of habit, both cups set out, the pot filled. The corridor past her dressing room, which he walked twice a day, once in the morning, once before bed, without being able to say why, except that he did. The writing desk, absent from the study, the space where it had stood still slightly visible in the pattern of the carpet. "I am not writing to ask you to come home," he wrote near the end. "I do not think asking is something I have earned the right to do. I am writing because I found, this week, that I could not let 11 days pass without you knowing what is true. What is true is that the house is smaller than I knew it was, and that I have been walking past your dressing room twice a day, and that I have not been into the morning room since you left." Helena read it twice. She sat at the writing desk for a long time afterward. Then she took out a sheet of paper and wrote back. Her reply was brief. "Come Sunday. Bring nothing. I will not pour the tea." He came on Sunday. He brought nothing. No flowers, no explanation, no prepared speech that she could hear in his manner when he came through the parlor door. He was simply William, in his traveling coat, slightly windblown, with the particular look of a man who has made a decision and is not certain what will happen next, but has decided the uncertainty is no longer a reason to stay home. Helena did not pour tea. The tray was on the table, but she made no move toward it, and he made no move toward it. And after a moment, they were simply standing in the room, facing each other, and the ordinary social machinery of cups and saucers had no claim on either of them. "I have one question," Helena said. He met her gaze. "Yes." "Not why you did not tell me." She paused. "I know why you did not tell me. You did not tell me because the arrangement predated our marriage and sat in a compartment of your life you never thought to open. I understand that. I have had a great deal of time to understand it." She looked at him steadily. "My question is different. What did you think I was, William? In 7 years of marriage? What did you think I was, that you never once thought to tell me?" He was quiet for a long moment, not composing an answer. She could see he was not composing, but finding it. "I think," he said slowly, "that I thought of you as someone I was responsible for, someone I should protect, someone whose peace I was meant to maintain." He paused. "I did not think of you as someone whose judgment I ought to trust, or whose knowledge I owed. I thought I was protecting you. I was actually deciding for you, every day, for 7 years." He stopped. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Not guilt, exactly, but something rawer than guilt. The specific discomfort of a man who has understood something about himself that he cannot unknow. "You found those bank drafts in year 2. You went to Bath. You understood what the arrangement was. You investigated it, and you made a decision, and you carried it for 5 years. Alone." He paused again. "I was incapable of that. I could not have done what you did. Held that knowledge, managed it, protected both of us from the weight of it. I did not know you could. I did not know you because I had not bothered to find out." Helena was quiet. "I do not know how to ask you to come home," he said. "I am not sure I have the right. What I would like to ask, if you will permit it, is whether you will let me visit. Every week, if you are willing. Until I have learned how to be married to the woman you actually are." rather than the woman I assumed you were? Helena did not answer that question. She stood for a moment, looking at him, and then she crossed the room. She took his face between her hands, both hands, steady, deliberate. And she kissed him, once, and slowly, and without rushing toward any conclusion. His hands came up and rested at her waist, and she felt the careful way he held her, as if she were something he was not certain he was permitted to hold. And she kissed him until she was ready to stop. She stepped back. "I have not decided about coming home," she said. "I want you to know that clearly. I have not decided." She looked at him. "I have decided about you. You may come every week." He stayed for 2 hours. They drank the tea, eventually, cold as it was by then. And they talked about Caroline's small estate, which her solicitor had written to inform them Caroline had left in Helena's name. They talked about the village school and about Marlowe House's east wall, which needed repointing before summer. They talked about nothing that was not real. When he left, he paused at the door. He did not say anything. He simply looked at her for a moment, with that expression she did not yet have a name for. And then he went. Helena stood at the window and watched his horse until it was out of sight. Then she went back to her grandmother's writing desk and sat down. And she did not write anything for a while. But the sitting was different from the sitting of the past 10 days. It had a direction to it, a sense of something that was not yet resolved, but was, at least, in motion. 6 weeks of Sundays. They learned, in those weeks, to speak plainly, about money, about what Caroline's small estate meant practically, about the years they had not shared. William told her about the deathbed promise to Caroline's father, the specific evening, the specific words, the particular weight of a promise made to a dying man, and the way it had sat in him afterward, unquestioned, as if questioning it would be a kind of betrayal. Helena told him about Bath, the lending library, the novel about botanical illustration, the 10 minutes with a young woman who had not known who she was, but had spoken of William with a straightforward, uncomplicated affection that had, in some essential way, been the thing that made Helena decide to keep her silence. "You were protecting him," William said. "I was protecting myself," Helena said. "I did not want to have the conversation. I did not want to be the woman who confronted her husband about a young woman in Bath and was told it was nothing, and then had to decide whether she believed him." She paused. "It was easier to know and to say nothing. I told myself it was grace. It was partly cowardice." He did not tell her it was not. She appreciated that. Augusta sent a stiff note of reconciliation in the 4th week, which was more than Helena had expected and less than she required. She wrote back civilly, thanked Augusta for the note, and did not invite her to call. Augusta, to her credit, did not push. On the 6th Sunday, Helena told him she was coming home. She did not make a production of it. She said it the way she said most things, plainly in the middle of a conversation about something else. And William set down his cup and looked at her, and she could see him deciding not to say too much about it, which was the right decision. "When?" he said. "Thursday," she said. "I will send the writing desk ahead." The writing desk arrived at Pembroke House on Wednesday, carried in by 2 footmen and placed, as Helena had specified in her note, in the morning room, beside William's reading chair, against the wall that caught the late afternoon light. The housekeeper rearranged the small table to make room for it, and when she stepped back and looked at the result, she found she could not entirely account for why the room felt different, only that it did, and that the difference was not unwelcome. Helena arrived on Thursday in her own carriage, on her own schedule, with Graves and the remaining trunks and a box of papers from the village school that she had been helping organize. She came through the front door without ceremony, declined the housekeeper's offer of tea in the drawing room, and walked directly to the morning room. William was there. He had been there for some time, she could tell. The fire was well established, the room was warm, and he was in his reading chair with a book he was clearly not reading. He stood when she came in. "The desk arrived," he said. "I see that." She crossed to it and ran her hand across the surface, the same surface she had touched in the locked study months ago. It looked right here, beside his chair, in the light from the east windows. It looked as if it had always been here. "There is tea," he said. He moved to the tray and poured, with a slight deliberateness that told her he understood exactly what he was doing. He poured her cup first, and then his own, and he brought hers to her and set it beside the writing desk. She picked it up and held it for a moment without drinking, watching him. "Thank you," she said. He sat back in his reading chair. She sat at her desk. Outside, the late spring light was moving across the garden in long, slow sweeps, and the house was making its ordinary sounds around them. The distant closing of a door, the sound of the groom in the yard, the small creak of the floorboard outside the morning room that had always announced someone approaching, and today announced no one at all. Helena set down her cup and drew a fresh sheet of paper from the small drawer. She had been composing it in her head for some time. The letters she had not written in 15 years. The letters she owed her mother, who had asked questions that Helena had answered with careful, managed half-truths for so long that the half-truths had become the correspondence. She picked up her pen and considered the first line. She did not see William set down his book. She did not see him write anything. But when she looked up, some time later, she found a small folded paper on the corner of her desk, placed there quietly, without announcement. She opened it. In his hand, a single line. "I see you now. Forgive me the years I did not." Helena read it. She looked at him, in his reading chair with his book, and he was not watching her. He had given her the note the way one gives a thing that does not require a response, only a receipt. She folded it carefully and placed it in the small locked drawer of her grandmother's writing desk, beside the bank drafts and the note from Bath and the record of 5 years of knowing alone. Then she turned back to her letter. The morning light was full on the page, and her hand was steady, and she began.